Following 2 weeks of rigorous discussions at the United Nations Climate Summit, COP29, in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, wealthy nations have committed to providing $300 billion annually by 2035 to assist poorer countries in coping with the effects of climate change. Developing countries have harshly criticized the agreement as being woefully inadequate to address the scope of the climate catastrophe, despite the fact that it represents a major increase over the previous $100 billion pledge. The oil and gas-rich former Soviet Republic hosted this year's conference, which took place against the backdrop of an impending political upheaval in the U.S., as the Donald Trump administration, which is skeptical of climate change, enters office in January. Many nations considered the failure to reach a new financial agreement in Baku to be an unacceptable risk in light of this uncertainty. Only $300 billion a year was set aside for grants and low-interest loans from rich countries to help the developing world transition to low-carbon economy and get ready for the effects of climate change, despite the adoption of a more ambitious goal of $1.3 trillion yearly by 2035. The agreement anticipates that private investment and other sources, such proposed fees on fossil fuels and frequent flyers, which are still up for debate, will provide the majority of the cash. Furthermore, as per the agreement, industrialized countries would be taking the lead in contributing the $300 billion, with the possibility that other countries could follow suit.
After 2 weeks of tense talks, industrialized nations pledged $300 billion a year for poorer countries to fight climate change by 2035. Developing nations at the COP29 summit in Azerbaijan rejected an earlier proposal before the breakthrough.
I now resume the 11th meeting of the CMA. I invite parties to turn to agenda sub-items 11A, new collective quantified goal on climate finance. I hereby invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision contained in document CMA/2024 L.22.
The sum is nowhere near the annual $1.3 trillion that low-income countries demanded. Despite the applause, delegates from those nations say they've been coerced into accepting a bad deal.
This document is nothing more than an optical illusion. This, in our opinion, will not address the enormity of the challenge we all face. Therefore, India opposes the adoption of this document.
The agreement replaces a document expiring this year, which commits developed countries to fund poorer nations facing extreme climate threats.
And the European Union and its member states will continue to play a leading role. And we have worked hard with all of you to ensure that there is significantly more money on the table. We're tripling the 100 billion goal, and we feel it is ambitious, it is needed, it is realistic, and it is achievable.
Activists say more funding is vital for poorer countries already facing increasing flooding, hunger and displacement because of changing weather patterns.
Countries are also facing climate crisis when they see how increasing disasters are destroying their homes and crops, and we see that infrastructure is getting damaged, but there is no money available to first climate-proof that infrastructure and houses, and when they are affected, how they can recover from these disasters.
The details of the funding are unclear, but could be in the form of loans and private investment, pushing developing countries further into debt. They argue that wealthier nations, which produce the vast majority of carbon emissions, should contribute the largest share to tackle climate change.
China, currently the greatest emitter in the world, is one of the newly wealthy rising economies that the US and the EU wish to contribute to. However, the agreement just encourages emerging economies to contribute voluntarily. A study on how to increase climate money for these nations is anticipated to be released during the next COP, which will take place in Brazil in 2025.